adapted into a calming sleep story from the reference motifs you shared. The night does not need to be hurried. If you are listening with tired eyes, let them soften now, as if the lids were made of warm silk. If you are listening with a mind that has been running all day, let it slow the way a train slows when it enters a quiet station. No jolt, no sudden stop, only a gentle easing into stillness. Imagine, for a moment, that you are standing at the mouth of a long hallway lit by candles. Not the bright, trembling kind that throws sharp shadows. These flames are small and steady, as if the air itself is calm enough to hold them upright. The walls are lined with old wooden shelves. The floor is stone, worn smooth by footsteps that belong to people who moved carefully, carrying knowledge like water in their hands. You take one slow step forward. The sound is soft. Your foot meets the stone with a muted hush. Somewhere far away, a door settles into its frame with a quiet click, and then nothing. No screens, no urgent voices, only the faint sigh of wax and wick, and the comfortable presence of silence. If you'd like, you can breathe with that silence. In through the nose, like drawing in a thin ribbon of warm light, and out, like letting a little dust drift down from a very old book. If your shoulders have been holding the day like a heavy coat, you can let that coat slip down now. Let the jaw unclench. Let the tongue rest. Let the forehead smooth out as if a warm hand passed across it. The candlelit hallway does not judge how tired you are. It simply offers you a place to set things down. Each breath is a quiet permission slip. You may pause, you may soften, you may rest for a while. Tonight, we are not chasing a secret to win it. We are taking a nighttime walk through history, slowly, kindly, until the past feels less like a heavy lesson and more like a soft lantern set on a windowsill. Our lantern begins in France, early 19th century, 1824. A museum storage room that most visitors never see. A back room behind back rooms where drawers slide open with a hush, where handwritten labels lean slightly to one side and where time itself seems to sit down and rest. On one ordinary afternoon, a wooden chest arrives. It is not dramatic. It simply appears, delivered by ordinary hands, set down on an ordinary table. The wood is old and a little rough, the corners softened by years. A thin layer of dust clings to the lid, the way flour clings to a baker's apron, evidence of quiet work, not of danger. The tag is wrong, the date is wrong, the name is misspelled, and so for a little while the chest belongs to no one. It waits among crates and cabinets and the slow breathing of archives. Waiting is what old objects do best. They learned patience long before we did. When the chest is finally opened, the sound is small, a creak, a soft complaint of wood, and then the hush of air meeting what has been sealed. Inside is linen, once white, now the color of pale sand. It is folded carefully as if someone long ago wanted to protect what was within, not by hiding it, but by wrapping it with respect. Beneath the linen rests a roll of papyrus. It looks fragile, but it is also stubborn, like a dried river reed that has decided somehow to outlast centuries. When the archivist lifts it, the papyrus makes a sound like a quiet exhale. The archivist is not a hero in the loud, cinematic sense. He is simply the kind of person who knows how to move slowly. He has ink stains on his fingertips. His sleeves are rolled to the forearm. He speaks in a low voice, not because he is afraid, but because he respects the sleeping atmosphere of the room. He lays the papyrus on the table. He does not rush to unroll it. First, he lights another candle, not for drama, but for steadiness. A small flame placed at the edge of the table, so the light falls across the fibers in a warm, even wash. Then he waits, letting the papyrus adjust, the way you let a tired person adjust to a warm blanket. Notice the details, the tiny beads of wax at the base of the candle, the faint shadow of the flame on the wall, the way the papyrus edges curl slightly, like dry leaves. In this moment, nothing is demanded of you. You don't have to memorize dates. You don't have to solve anything. You are only invited to be present, as if your mind is a quiet room too, one with its own shelves, its own drawers, its own places where old thoughts can rest without being touched. And in the calm of that invitation, a question arrives, not as a test, but as a gentle key. What is the door to the story? A candlelit hallway, the rustling of paper, or the smell of old wood? Which image unlocks it most quickly? Let your answer be simple, let it be personal, let it be yours. Because this story is not only about an ancient scroll, it is about the way certain images, certain sounds, can bring us back to ourselves. Before we drift deeper into tonight's gentle journey, remember to subscribe to Ancient Sleep Story. Here, you'll always find peaceful stories that soothe the heart and quiet the mind. Where are you listening from tonight? Leave a comment. Your presence adds warmth to this quiet corner of the night. Here, no one rests alone. Every story from the past is a soft lantern in the dark, gently lighting our way tonight. Now, let's return to that table. The archivist begins to unroll the papyrus, millimeter by millimeter. The fibers loosen with a whisper. The surface reveals ink that is not truly black anymore, more like deep brown, softened by time. And there, drawn in careful strokes, are shapes that feel both simple and endless. A bird, an eye, a reed, a sun disk, symbols that once sat under the same sky, we sit under now, though the constellations had different names on human tongues. For centuries, these symbols were silent to most of the world. They were beautiful, yes, like carvings on a temple wall, but unreadable. And an unreadable language becomes, in the imagination, whatever we fear or desire. But the truth often is gentler than our extremes. A language is a house for meaning, and meaning is one of the softest things that can hold a human life. If you have ever been calmed by someone saying the right words at the right time, simple words, kind words, you already understand the heart of what the ancient Egyptians believed about speech. They had a name for the subtle force inside words, a force that was not about frightening anyone, but about shaping the inner world, intention made audible. They called it Heka, not as a threat, more like a craft, like weaving, like lighting a lamp. In this telling, Heka is the art of speaking with care, so that the mind can settle, so that the heart can find its balance, so that a person can remember they are not only a bundle of tasks and worries, but also a living breath beneath the stars. The archivist, of course, does not say all of this out loud. He reads the first symbols slowly, sounding them out the way you sound out a lullaby in a language you are still learning, and then he pauses, because the first line is not a list of royal titles. It is not a proud declaration. It is something quieter. It speaks of breath. It speaks of light. It speaks gently of a human being learning to align their inner world with the calm, steady order of the universe. Outside, the city continues, wheels on cobblestone, winter air. But inside the storage room, time loosens its grip. The museum becomes a small boat, floating on a dark river lit by candlelight. And the papyrus becomes a star map for the mind. The archivist leans closer. He follows the line of symbols the way a fingertip follows embroidery. And as he does, we can begin to drift slowly backward. The candlelight on the table begins to resemble a different kind of light. Egyptian sun, warm and patient. The dry smell of papyrus begins to resemble river reeds, fresh and green, bending in a breeze. The quiet of the storage room begins to resemble the quiet of an evening on the Nile, when the water turns dark like polished stone and the sky begins to fill with stars. But we are not there yet. First, we stay with this room because it is our safe place, our anchor. Notice the drawers, the labels, the string tied around bundles of paper. It is a place designed for keeping stories, keeping names, keeping the fragile pieces of what humans once loved enough to write down. And in that sense, it is not so different from you, because you have kept things too. Moments you rarely open, phrases someone once said to you, small sentences that still sit warm in the chest. Tonight's story will move among those drawers with kindness. It will not slam anything open. It will simply offer a slow walk through the idea that words, spoken softly, held gently, can become a form of shelter. As the papyrus unrolls further, a small illustration appears. Nothing elaborate, just a careful curve of lines that suggests a doorway. Not a door with locks and iron. A threshold drawn with light. The archivist's finger hovers above it, not touching. He feels in that moment that he is looking at a kind of instruction, not for control, but for calm, for clarity, for remembering. He reaches one more line, one line that feels like a hand placed gently on the heart. Speak with truth, and the light within you will remember its shape. He does not know yet where the line will lead. He only knows it leads. And that is enough for the night. The archivist's name, if you were to see it written on the inside cover of one of his notebooks, would be Etienne. He writes it in a careful hand, as if each letter needs its own quiet breathing space. He has spent years among these shelves, where history is not a grand parade, but a long, slow storage of ordinary miracles. A clay seal the size of a thumbnail, a broken comb carved from bone, a scrap of linen with a faint blue stripe. Small things that have outlived their owners, not through drama, but through patience. Tonight, Etienne does what he always does when something old and delicate finds its way to his table. He makes the room even calmer. He closes the door, softly, until the latch catches with a sound like a whisper, turning into a promise. He adjusts the lamp so the light is low and warm. He moves a chair slightly, just enough that it no longer scrapes the floor. And then he waits for a beat or two, listening for the room to settle, like waiting for water to stop rippling after you set a cup down. If you are still awake in your own room, you can do the same kind of settling. Let the air around you feel a little quieter. Let the corners of the space become gentle. And if there is any part of you still holding the day too tightly, imagine setting it on a shelf for the night, the way Etienne sets his quill down. On the table, the papyrus lies unrolled to a modest width, as if it prefers not to show too much of itself at once. Its surface is the color of old honey. The fibers run in thin lines like river reeds pressed into a single skin. The ink sits in small, confident strokes, each symbol shaped by a hand that once knew exactly how much pressure to use. Etienne brings a magnifying glass close, and the candlelight swells in the lens, turning the page into a warm little sun. He studies one sign, a bird with a curved beak, another, a tall reed, straight as a quiet spine, another, a hand, palm open, as if offering something. He is not rushing to translate everything. The first gift, he knows, is simply looking, because looking is already a form of respect. Across the room, drawers sit half asleep, their brass handles dull in the low light. Bundles of documents rest in linen ties. Labels in faded ink mention places that feel like soft music. Thebes, Memphis, Abydos, names that once rang beneath bright skies, now whispered inside a European storeroom. Etienne has heard the world speak of Egypt with an excited voice, full of treasure and mystery and feverish imagination. But he prefers the quieter Egypt, the Egypt of daily rhythms, water poured into clay cups, bread baked in the early heat, sandals left at a doorway, stars watched with steady eyes. He has never been to Egypt, yet through these objects, he has visited it in the only way history truly allows, slowly and with humility. He dips his pen and begins to write in his notebook, not a translation yet, but a map of attention. The placement of symbols, the thickness of lines, the way one column ends and another begins. He copies the doorway-like curve he noticed earlier. He sketches the sun disk, he notes the direction the birds face, and as he does, the room seems to breathe with him. You might notice your own breathing now, in and out. A slow tide, a steady, forgiving rhythm, not a performance, not a technique, just the body remembering that it knows how to soften. In the years before this night, Europe has been learning, little by little, how to hear Egypt's written voice again. For a long time, the hieroglyphs were admired like patterns on a rug, beautiful, repeating, mysterious, but assumed to be purely symbolic. Then, like a patient door opening, scholars began to understand something tender and almost obvious. These signs could carry sound. A bird could be more than a bird. A reed could be more than a reed. A hand could be more than a hand. They could be letters, syllables, breath made visible. To Etienne, this is not merely an academic triumph, it is a kind of reunion. A conversation resumed after a long pause. Imagine someone you love leaving you a note, written in a script you can't yet read. You would still keep it. You would still touch the paper gently. You would still feel the warmth of intention inside it, even before you understood the words. That is what Etienne feels now. He is not frightened by the idea of ancient magic. He is soothed by it because he senses that at its heart the ancient craft is about tending the human spirit, about naming the world with care, about aligning the inner life with the steady order of the sky. The candle flame trembles once, as if it has taken a tiny breath. Etienne glances up. The flame steadies again. The air is still. The museum is quiet. Somewhere beyond the walls, a horse cart passes, wheels rolling over stone, a sound like distant thunder softened by distance. Then the sound fades. Only the room remains, only the papyrus, only the slow unfolding of attention. He reads another line, sounding the shapes in his mind the way a child sounds out a new song. In his notebook he writes a few tentative notes, careful not to claim certainty. He is humble with the past. He knows it does not owe him clarity. Clarity is something you earn with gentleness. As he studies the column, he notices something unusual, something so small it would be easy to miss if you were impatient. In the margin, tucked beside the main text, is a tiny mark, a faint sketch of a knot, a looped cord drawn with a single line. It is not decorative. It feels like a sign left by the scribe, a quiet wink across time. Etienne's heart makes a small, warm shift, like a lantern being turned slightly so it lights a new corner of the room. He turns a page in his notebook. He draws the knot. He writes beside it, in French, a word that means both tie and bond. And then he remembers something he once read in a dusty volume, that in Egypt, to bind a word to breath was to give it strength, not strength to harm, but strength to hold calm, to hold order, to hold the feeling of being sheltered in the world. You can let that idea settle in you now. Words that hold, breath that steadies, a bond that does not tighten like a trap, but wraps like a scarf against night air. Etienne leans closer. The next symbols, faint and slightly smudged, form a phrase that he cannot fully translate yet, but he recognizes one element clearly: the sign for house. Not a grand palace, a simple house, a place of keeping, a place of life. And beside it, the sign that suggests writing, learning, record, the quiet work of ink on fiber. A house of life. A house where words are kept alive. For a moment, as he lets the phrase rest on his tongue, the storage room changes in his imagination, not abruptly, but the way a dream shifts scenes without breaking the calm. The shelves become taller, carved stone rising into shadow. The candlelight becomes a softer, wider glow. The smell of damp wood becomes river air at dusk. Somewhere, far away, water moves, unhurried, so gently. The house of life. In the old world, it was not only a building. It was a way of treating knowledge as something living, something that needed care, rhythm, and patience. A place where scribes learned to shape words the way potters shape clay, where the sound of a reed pen against papyrus could be as steady as light rain, where a teacher might say gently, "Slow down. Let the line breathe." Etienne imagines a small courtyard within a temple, quiet in the midday heat. A pool of shade under a colonnade. A cup of water set near a stack of fresh papyrus sheets. A dish of ink, black for most of the lines, red for guidance, used not to shout, but to lead the eye kindly. He imagines the scribes themselves, not as distant figures, but as people with ordinary fatigue. A wrist that aches after hours of writing, a neck that stiffens, a sigh that escapes when the day is long, and yet still they write, because to write is to keep a thread unbroken. You may know that feeling in the quiet ways you keep your own life stitched together, a routine that steadies you, a gentle habit that brings you back to center. Outside the imagined courtyard, the river runs luminous. Reeds bend with the breeze, the same reeds that will one day become sheets, so that breath can become mark, and mark can become memory. If you'd like, picture that river now at night, when the stars gather above it like quiet witnesses. Hear the water's continuous hush, neither loud nor silent, simply present. And as you listen, let your thoughts do what the river does, move, but not rush. Perhaps that is what this papyrus is offering too, a place to practice calm, one line at a time. Etienne sits back. The chair creaks softly like an old friend clearing his throat. He feels, suddenly, that this papyrus is not only a text, it is an invitation, an address. As if someone, long ago, wrote down directions for the weary. If your mind is restless, come here. If your heart is heavy, come here. If the night feels too wide, come here. A house of life, a house of quiet words. And now, with the candlelight pooling like warm water on the table, Etienne gently places his fingertip near the edge of the next roll, preparing to unseal more of the scroll. Because somewhere ahead, he senses, the house has a door, and the door is about to open. Etienne does not pull the papyrus open all at once. He has learned that old things prefer kindness over speed, and that the mind does too. So he pauses again, letting the candlelight do its slow work. The flame makes a small oval of gold on the table, and around that oval the room becomes softer at the edges. The drawers do not look like storage anymore. They look like sleeping mouths closed gently, keeping their stories warm inside. If you are listening with a mind that still wants to run ahead, you can let it sit down here, beside Etienne's chair. Let it fold its hands, let it watch, rather than chase. Inhale, as if you are drawing in the quiet glow of the candle. Exhale, as if you are letting the day's dust fall away from your shoulders. Now, with fingers steady and unhurried, Etienne lifts the linen a little more and unrolls another inch of the papyrus. The new section is darker, as if it has been closer to the center of the roll for centuries, protected from light and air. The ink is clearer here, the symbols stand with more confidence. A row of birds faces toward a sun disk, a pair of reeds lean like tall grasses. A small bowl sits beneath a line, like a crescent of earth holding water. Etienne copies them with care. And while he copies, something very gentle begins to happen. The signs stop feeling like decoration and start feeling like footsteps. Not hurried footsteps, slow ones, like a person walking through a garden at night. This is what it means perhaps to begin hearing a language again. At first it is only shapes, then the shapes become sounds, and then, one evening, the sounds become presence. Long ago the past was not quiet. It spoke all day. It argued, laughed, prayed, complained about the heat, whispered to children, greeted neighbors. The only reason it seems silent now is because we forgot how to listen. For the ancient Egyptians, writing was not separate from life. A sign was not merely a label. It was a way of holding the world steady, like tying a cord around a bundle so nothing spills. A bird on papyrus was not only a bird, it was the idea of flight, of breath moving through air, of a name that could travel. An eye was not only an eye, it was attention, wakefulness, the gentle act of noticing. And the sun disk, round and calm, was not only a sun, it was rhythm, return. The promise that light comes back again and again, even after the long dark. Etienne finds himself soothed by these meanings because they do not demand anything from him. They do not shout, they simply offer a quiet order, an old, patient way of arranging reality. He reaches for a small book beside him, one of the newer volumes, still smelling faintly of fresh paper. It is filled with notes from scholars who have been learning how to read these signs. Etienne does not worship the book. He uses it like a lantern, enough light to take the next step, no more. He whispers a few sounds under his breath, testing them gently, as if he is speaking to the papyrus rather than about it. And in that whisper, you can feel the story begin to drift. Not away from you, but with you. Like a boat leaving the dock slowly, the rope uncoiling without a snap. The museum room remains our anchor, yes, the candle remains steady, but the air begins to hold another scent, river dampness, reeds, the faint mineral smell of stone warmed by sun and then cooled by night. If you want, imagine that you are still in your bed, still safe, still warm. And also imagine that your mind has stepped into a second place, as quietly as a dream. A wide river, night water dark as ink, stars above it, scattered like salt across velvet. Along the bank, palm fronds whisper together. Somewhere a bird calls once, only once, and then the night returns to its calm. A small boat glides on the surface, a long shape moving through the moon's reflection. The rower's hands are steady. The oar dips with a soft sigh. There is no rush. The river will carry you either way. On the boat sits a scribe, not a priest, with thunder in his voice, not a king with heavy jewels, just a person with a reed pen, a roll of papyrus, and the patient responsibility of keeping words alive. His shoulders are narrow, his posture is practiced. When he writes, his wrist moves in smooth, economical curves, as if he is drawing music rather than letters. He writes because writing is how his world remembers itself. He writes because a name, once written, can be held like a candle through time. The boat passes a temple, its columns dark against the sky. The temple is not frightening. It is calm, massive, steady. Stone gathered into shape, a shelter for the human need to speak with the unseen. Torches burn low at the entrance, their flames subdued by the night breeze. The light is warm, and it does not flicker wildly. It behaves like everything in this world of measured rhythms. Inside the temple is a courtyard. Inside the courtyard is a doorway. And inside that doorway is another kind of room, cool, quiet, lined with shelves. The house of life. A place where scribes learn, where healers consult texts, where prayers are copied, where calendars are kept, where stories and instructions and hymns are stored the way seeds are stored, not dead, but waiting. In this imagined house of life, the air smells of ink and linen and dust that has nothing sharp in it. The walls are smooth, the floor is swept. The sound of writing is the loudest thing, the soft scratch of reed on papyrus, repeated and steady like rainfall. If your thoughts have been loud lately, notice how this steadiness feels. Scratch, pause, scratch. A patient pattern, a calming metronome. The scribe on the boat brings his papyrus inside. He sits among others, each one bent over their work, each one part of a quiet ecosystem of attention. No one is competing, no one is performing. They are simply tending the language the way you tend a garden, pulling the weeds of carelessness, watering the roots of meaning. One teacher walks behind them, his sandals making almost no sound. When he stops beside a student, he does not scold. He points gently, and the student adjusts a line, making it smoother, clearer, kinder to the eye. That kindness matters because the Egyptians believed that words have weight. Not heavy, crushing weight, more like the weight of a blanket. The kind that can comfort you, or the kind that can suffocate if it is thrown carelessly. This is where Heka lives, not in fireworks, not in fear, but in intention. In the decision to speak in a way that settles the spirit. In the decision to name what is true so the mind stops wrestling shadows. To name the feeling and let it sit down. To name the night and realize it is not an enemy. To name the breath and feel it return. If you've ever whispered to yourself, "It's okay," when you were alone, you have practiced a small, modern form of that ancient craft. The scribes know a word spoken with care becomes a bridge, a word spoken with cruelty becomes a stone. So they practice bridges. Outside the museum, winter keeps its own slow watch, but inside, the candle makes a small season of warmth. Etienne rests his palms on the table, feeling the wood's quiet grain, the building's faint settling. He imagines the same pause in the house of life. A scribe lifting his eyes from the page, letting them meet the night through a doorway, then returning to the line with a calmer heart. If you are still carrying a thought that keeps circling, you can set it down quietly beside you now the way a pen is set down. Name it softly. Worry, tiredness, longing, then let the name float away like breath. In this story, naming is not a trap, it is a lantern. It shows you the shape of the feeling and then it lets you rest. The paper does not demand perfection. It only asks for gentleness. Back in the museum, Etienne's pen scratches softly. He does not realize he is smiling, but he is. The symbols in front of him feel less like puzzles and more like people. People who loved order, who loved rhythm, who loved the quiet power of saying a thing clearly. He unrolls another section. A new illustration appears, a mouth slightly open beside a slender tool like a small chisel. The drawing is simple, but it carries a tenderness that surprises him. Etienne recognized the theme from other texts, an old ritual often described as opening the mouth. In some tellings, people make it sound grim, like a scene meant to shock. But here, in the gentle light, it feels different. It feels like a metaphor for restoration, a way of saying, even what is tired, even what has gone quiet, can be given its voice back. Not to shout, just to speak again, to taste water, to feel air, to receive a lullaby. Etienne's gaze lingers on the little mouth. He thinks of his own day, of all the words he swallowed, all the feelings he did not name, all the tiredness he carried without speaking it aloud. And then, very softly, as if he is afraid to disturb the calm, he unrolls one more inch. There, written in red ink, used for guidance, for sacred emphasis, he sees a short phrase repeated, like a heartbeat, a formula, a gentle instruction, a line that begins with the idea of light and ends with the idea of breath. Etienne feels the same warm shift again, the lantern turning, lighting a new corner. He does not translate it yet, but he knows the way you know when a melody is about to resolve that this is the doorway deeper into the scroll. The red ink does not scream across the papyrus. It sits there quietly, like a small ember tucked beneath ash. In the candlelight, it looks almost gentle, less like warning, more like guidance, the way a calm voice might guide you back to yourself. Etienne shifts the candle a fraction of an inch so the flame shines evenly. The room answers with softness. Shadows relax along the shelves. The air remains still, as if it understands that this is not the hour for sharp movements. He reads the red phrase again, not with certainty, but with attention. It repeats in short pulses, appearing at the end of one line, then again a little lower, then again beside a small illustration of a feather, a refrain, a quiet pattern. The kind of repetition that makes the mind feel safe. In another life, your life, perhaps, repetition is what brings you down from a spinning day. The same mug, the same warm light, the same corner of the pillow, the same simple sentence you tell yourself, I'm here, I'm safe, I can rest. This papyrus seems to know that. Etienne turns a page in his notebook and draws the phrase as best he can, copying each sign with slow care. He sketches the feather too. It reminds him of balance, of something light, something honest, something that doesn't strain the air. He leans closer, and as he does, he notices how the scribe wrote these lines long ago. The strokes are steady, not hurried. The columns are even. There is a tenderness in the spacing, as if the writer wanted the reader to breathe between words. If you'd like, you can breathe with the page. In, as if you're taking in a thin stream of warm candlelight. Out, as if you're letting your thoughts settle on the bottom of a quiet lake. For a moment, Etienne does not translate. He simply listens to the feeling of the symbols. He has learned that understanding often arrives like dawn, first a pale shift, then a little more light. Then suddenly you realize the room has changed. He runs his finger without touching along the column, tracking the order of signs. Bird, reed, mouth, water, sun. A small seated figure, a loaf of bread, a ripple line that means water, repeated twice like a hush-hush, and then the feather again. There are many feathers in Egyptian writing, he knows. Feathers can mean air, lightness, truth. They can belong to Ma'at, the principle of balance and order, the quiet justice of the cosmos. Not justice as punishment, but as alignment. The way a wheel turns smoothly when it is true. Etienne thinks of that wheel now, of the day's spinning thoughts and how soothing it is when they finally align. He whispers, almost without realizing, Ma'at. The word is soft in the room. It does not disturb anything. It feels like naming a calm. And in that moment, the story slides gently toward the river again, toward the house of life, where the same principle lived not in argument, but in daily practice. In the imagined courtyard, a scribe sits cross-legged on a woven mat. The night breeze moves through the columns. The sky is deep and wide, and the stars look close enough to touch. A small oil lamp burns beside the papyrus, its flame steady like a patient companion. The scribe's teacher speaks in a low voice. "Do not rush the words," he says. "Words are living, they need breath." And the student nods because he has felt it too. When you hurry, meaning breaks. When you slow down, meaning settles into place like sand after a wave passes. Back in the museum, Etienne feels that same truth. He can almost hear the ancient teacher behind him, not demanding, only guiding. So he lets himself go slow. He consults his reference book again. He turns pages that sound like dry leaves. He finds a familiar cluster of signs: the mouth, the ripple line, the loaf. He traces the entry with his finger. Speak, water, offer. The phrase, in its simplest reading, is not frightening at all. It is an instruction for gentleness, a small ritual of alignment. Speak and let the waters settle. Speak and offer what is true. Speak and the light within you will remember its shape. Etienne pauses after writing those words in his notebook. He doesn't know if he has it exactly right, but he knows the feeling is right. It carries no threat. It carries no chase. It carries the same tone as a lullaby, an invitation to return to steadiness. If you're listening from a busy American night, maybe after screens and emails and traffic and long conversations, imagine hearing that line as if someone wrote it for you. Speak and let the waters settle. Even if you don't speak aloud, you can speak inwardly. You can tell your body gently what it needs to hear. You can say, rest. You can say, enough. You can say, tomorrow can wait. The papyrus seems to understand something timeless. The human mind can be soothed not only by silence, but by the right kind of words, words that don't add noise, words that don't demand performance, words that simply hold the edges of the night so you feel safe inside it. Etienne unrolls a little more. A new scene appears, drawn simply, like a child's careful sketch. A figure standing before a small altar, hands lifted, palms open. Above the figure is a spiral line, like breath made visible. And beside it, again, red ink. This time, the red phrase is followed by a different set of signs: a star, a boat, and a circle that could be the sun or the horizon. The signs are small, but the picture they form is vast. Etienne's eyes soften. He feels the story widen. He thinks of the Egyptians looking up at the night sky, not with panic, but with relationship. Stars were not cold points. They were companions. They were markers. They were reminders of order, of Ma'at, above the changing mess of daily life. If you have ever stepped outside at night and felt your worries shrink under the sky, you already know the medicine of that vastness. Your breath lengthens, your heart slows, your mind stops pretending it can control everything. The papyrus is offering that same medicine, wrapped in signs. Etienne tries a careful translation of the star phrase. He does not force it. He lets the symbols suggest themselves. He finds something like, follow the star that does not rush, and then let the boat of your breath cross safely. The words make him smile again because they feel like instructions for sleeping, written thousands of years ago. Not a spell for power over others, but a craft for peace within oneself. This is the soft discovery at the heart of the scroll, that what modern people might call magic was often simply psychology with poetry. A way to take the invisible weather of the mind, fear, grief, restlessness, and bring it back into balance with rhythm, breath, and meaning. Words as medicine, words as oars, words as lamps. Etienne sits back, letting the idea settle. He hears the quiet of the storage room, the candle's faint hiss, the distant building settling, the small whisper of paper as his notebook page relaxes. He looks down at the papyrus again and notices a detail he missed before. In the lower margin, faint as a footprint in dust, is a different handwriting, smaller, less formal, like a note scribbled later by another hand. Etienne leans in. The ink is lighter, as if it had less pigment, or as if time has been more hungry here. He can make out only a few signs, but one of them is unmistakable, a simple rectangle with a doorway, house, and beside it, the sign for heart, House of the Heart. The phrase is so quiet it feels like it belongs to no one and everyone, like a private reminder left for a tired reader. The true altar is within. The true temple is the place inside you that can become still. For a moment, Etienne forgets he is in 1824. The candlelight becomes the glow of a lamp in the House of Life. The museum air becomes the cool temple air. And the scroll feels less like an artifact and more like a hand reaching across time to touch the center of a human chest. If tonight's story reminded you of a beautiful memory, feel free to share it below. And if it didn't remind you of a memory, maybe it reminded you of something else, the possibility that calm can be learned, practiced, returned to again and again, like the sun. Etienne's gaze returns to the wrong label on the wooden chest, the misfiled date, the misspelled name. He suddenly wonders, if this scroll was placed in the wrong drawer, what else might be connected to it? A companion document, a catalogue entry, a note from a previous curator who sensed its tenderness but couldn't name it. He stands slowly, careful not to jostle the table. The chair whispers against the floor. He walks to the wall of drawers and runs his fingers along the brass labels, reading them like prayer beads. He stops at a drawer marked with a faded number that matches a portion of the chest's tag. Almost. Close, but not exact. Close enough to be a doorway. He takes a breath. He lifts the handle, and the drawer begins to slide open with the softest sound, like the first page of a new dream turning. A breath of cooler air slips out, carrying the scent of old cedar and paper that has slept for decades. Inside, files rest in neat stacks tied with string gone soft with age. Etienne lifts the top bundle and finds a small index card, edges browned, ink faded to tea. On it, in a careful hand, someone wrote a single English word, like a translation offered forward, peace. Beneath it, in French, Heka, spoken gently, soothes the heart. At the bottom is a tiny feather and a number, 318. His fingers pause and the candlelight seems to breathe with him. The index card is small enough to disappear in the palm of Etienne's hand, yet it carries the weight of a doorway. Peace, it says in English, an unexpected word to find inside a French drawer, tucked among numbers and dust. Beneath it, the line in French feels like a soft echo. Heka, spoken gently, soothes the heart. And at the bottom, a feather drawn with a patient stroke beside a number, 318. Etienne does not hurry. He lets the card rest on his fingertips, the way you might let a warm cup rest there, feeling its heat before you drink. The candlelight spreads across the ink, and for a moment, the word peace looks like it is glowing from within the paper. If you are listening with sleep already gathering around the edges of your mind, you can let this be your simple anchor. Peace is not something you must earn tonight. It is something you can enter quietly, the way a person enters a dim room and closes the door behind them. In and out. A slow breath that asks for nothing. Etienne returns to the table and sets the index card beside the papyrus. The two sit together like strangers who recognize each other across time. The feather on the card seems to answer the feather drawn in the red ink passage, as if the old scribe and the unknown cataloguer were speaking in the same gentle language: balance, lightness, alignment. He flips the card over. On the back is a faint stamp from the museum's archive office and a few lines written in pencil. The handwriting is older than Etienne's own, the graphite softened by years, as though even the letters have learned to sleep. He reads it slowly, moving his lips without sound. Box 318, misfiled, provenance uncertain, possibly purchased in Cairo. Note: words for calming the mind. Etienne's chest loosens at that last phrase. Not because it is dramatic, but because it is human. Someone, at some point, looked at this scroll and did not see danger or treasure. They saw comfort. They saw a text meant to settle the spirit, like a hand resting on a shoulder. He opens his notebook to a clean page and writes 318. Words for calming the mind. Then he stands again, carrying the index card like a candle flame he does not want to spill. He walks deeper into the storage room, where the air is cooler and the shelves are higher and the shadows gather in friendly corners. Each step is quiet. The museum seems to approve of this pace, as if the building itself has been waiting for someone to move slowly enough to hear it. Drawer 318 is not labeled on the outside. Many drawers are. This one is not. It sits in the middle of a cabinet that looks older than the others, its wood darker, its handles dulled to a soft bronze. Etienne runs his fingers along the edge and feels a slight ridge, as if the drawer has been opened and closed so many times that it has formed its own small memory. He pulls. The drawer slides with a sigh. Inside, the files are arranged in neat stacks, each bundle tied with linen string. The smell is gentle, cedar, paper, and that faint sweetness old books sometimes carry, like dried flowers pressed between pages. Etienne lifts the first bundle. The string yields softly, as though grateful to be untied. He unfolds the outer sheet and finds a set of notes, catalogue entries, inventory marks, short descriptions of objects that have passed through many hands. He reads without rushing: a carved scarab, a fragment of painted wood, a small amulet shaped like an eye. Then, halfway down the page, something that makes him pause. Papyrus roll, protective linen, red ink guidance, feather motif, catalogued under Heka, calming utterances. The words send a warm shiver through him, not a frightening shiver, just the pleasant recognition of connection. The papyrus on his table has an address, a place in the museum's memory, not lost, not unclaimed. He turns the page. Attached is a thin slip of parchment with a date, written almost casually. Received 1819, recatalogued 1822, misplaced after relocation. The numbers are simple, but Etienne does not linger on them. He knows the mind can wake itself by trying to build a timeline too tightly. Instead, he treats the dates like small stones on a path, enough to keep direction, not enough to make the walk heavy. He continues. There is a note from a previous curator, only a few lines, written in careful French. Not for public display, the text is quiet and private. It reads like a nocturnal prayer. There is tenderness in it. Perhaps it is meant to be spoken softly. Nocturnal prayer, tenderness, spoken softly. Etienne feels the museum room turn warmer, even though the air has not changed. He imagines the curator writing that line late at night, perhaps by lamplight, perhaps after closing hours, as if they too needed something calm to hold them. He brings the bundle back to the table and lays the pages beside the papyrus. The candlelight now touches three objects at once: the ancient scroll, the index card, and the curator's note. Together, they form a small constellation. a cluster of quiet confirmations. If you are listening from a place where the world has been loud, let this constellation be yours too. A few gentle proofs that peace has existed in every age, and that people have always tried to write it down. Etienne sits again. He takes a breath. He looks at the papyrus, then at the curator's note, then at the phrase he copied earlier, "Speak and let the waters settle." He begins to unroll the scroll again. This section is arranged differently. The columns are wider, the symbols are spaced with more room between them, as if the scribe wanted the reader to go slowly. There are fewer divine names here, fewer formal titles. Instead, there are simple images, a person sitting, a hand offering, a cup, a ripple line, a sky sign, a star. It reads like instructions for an inner journey. Not a journey across deserts, but across the mind's restless terrain. Etienne recognizes a repeating pattern, a line that begins with the mouth sign, then the water sign, then the feather. He thinks of it as a rhythm: speak, water, feather. Word, calm, balance. He writes in his notebook, words as water, words as feather. And then, as the candle burns lower, the museum room begins to feel like a night boat again. The table becomes a small deck. The papyrus becomes a river map. The columns of signs become stars reflected in dark water. In his imagination, your imagination too if you wish, the house of life returns, but this time it is quieter, later at night. The courtyard is empty, the scribes have gone home. Only one remains, an older scribe, perhaps a teacher, sitting alone with a lamp and a roll of papyrus. He is not lonely, he's simply still. He unrolls the papyrus and reads the calming words aloud, very softly, so softly that the air barely changes. And as he speaks, the temple seems to breathe with him. The stone cools, the shadows soften, the night feels held. This is Heka as care, not power over the world, but harmony within it. Back in 1824, Etienne's pen pauses. He realizes something tender, that the scroll is not only describing a practice, it is performing it. The repetition, the spacing, the gentle imagery, these are not just meanings, they are a lullaby structure. The text is designed to settle the reader in the act of reading. He looks at the red ink again, now understanding it differently. Red is not danger here, red is guidance, a teacher's gentle emphasis, a hand pointing to the line that matters most when your mind is tired. He follows the guidance. The red phrase leads to a small illustration, a doorway, and inside the doorway, a tiny flame. A candle inside a house. A lamp inside a heart. Etienne swallows quietly. His eyes feel warm. Not with sadness exactly, more with gratitude, the kind that arrives when you realize someone long ago cared enough to leave you comfort. He reads the line beneath the drawing, and this time the meaning lands more clearly. It speaks of a house of the heart, yes, but it also speaks of a path of return, a way back to stillness even when the mind has wandered far. Etienne writes the phrase in his notebook, the path of return. Then, at the bottom of the column, he finds a new mark, something like a seal, a signature, a name, not a royal name, a scribe's name, and beside it, a place name written in a smaller hand, Per Ankh, House of Life. But there is something else, one more sign, faint and unusual, like a tiny spiral. Etienne leans closer. He feels the soft pull of curiosity, the kind that doesn't wake you with adrenaline, but keeps you listening because it is beautiful. The spiral appears again, lower down, beside a star and a boat. And then, at the very edge of the scroll, almost hidden, Etienne sees a note written sideways, like an afterthought. Read this at night. Read this when the heart is heavy. Follow the star within. He exhales, slow and full, as if the scroll has just placed a warm hand on his chest. And then he notices what he had not noticed before, a faint crease in the papyrus, as if something had once been tucked inside the roll, an inserted slip, a companion piece. His fingers hover over the crease. The candlelight flickers once, just once, like a blink. Etienne realizes the drawer may not be finished speaking. He turns back toward the cabinet, the one with unlabeled drawers, and he reaches for the next bundle in box 318, one tied with a darker string, one marked with the same spiral sign. And as he loosens the knot, the night seems to lean closer, listening. Just breathe and stay here now. Etienne loosens the darker string as if he is untying a ribbon from a gift meant for someone tired. The knot yields without resistance. The bundle opens like a quiet flower, its petals made of thin paper and careful handwriting. Outside, the city keeps moving, but here, everything slows. Inside are 3 items. First, a folded letter, French, formal, brief, written by a curator whose name Etienne recognizes from older inventories. Second, a small sheet of tracing paper covered in copied hieroglyphs, the ink faint and respectful. And third, a slip of papyrus no wider than 2 fingers tucked inside as if it had been hiding in the bundle's breathing space. That slip carries the spiral. It is drawn in the margin with a single continuous line, not perfectly round, but human, steady, gentle, alive. Beside it is the star sign again, and beneath the star, a boat. The little boat looks almost childlike, a curved hull and a small upright stroke like a mast. Etienne lifts the slip carefully with tweezers, the way one lifts a fallen feather. He brings it back to the table and lays it beside the main scroll. For a moment, he simply watches it in the candlelight. If you are listening, and your mind has begun to drift, let it drift. Let it drift the way a leaf drifts on water, held, not lost. In, slow. Out, slower. The folded letter speaks in the quiet language of archives, dates, signatures, practical decisions, but even this practicality has a softness. The curator writes that certain texts should remain in the back rooms because they are intimate and because the public gaze tends to turn everything into spectacle. The letter ends with a line Etienne reads twice. Some words were not made for the crowd, they were made for the night. He sets the letter down and returns to the slip of papyrus. The copied hieroglyphs on the tracing paper provide a hint. Someone long ago tried to transcribe the slip signs into a more familiar arrangement. Etienne follows the shapes. The mouth sign, the water ripples, the feather, the star, the spiral, the small seated figure with a hand near the heart. It reads in rhythm like a sequence meant to be spoken. Not shouted, not announced. Spoken the way you speak to a child who is almost asleep. Spoken the way you speak to yourself when you are alone and trying to be kind. Etienne begins to sound it out, syllable by syllable, using the scholar's notes as a lantern. The room remains still, but something changes anyway, something subtle, like when you lower your voice and everyone around you becomes quieter without noticing. He reads the first line. Then he pauses because he feels a tenderness in it. The slip is not an official prayer. It is not a royal declaration. It is closer to what we might call a private practice, a small sequence of calm meant to settle the inner weather of a person. The ancient Egyptians had many words for the parts of the self. Some were about breath, some about shadow, some about the bright spark that moves through a human life. Etienne does not chase the categories tonight. He keeps the meaning simple because simplicity is what helps the mind soften. He interprets the line as "let your mouth be gentle," and beneath it, "let your waters be smooth," and then "let your heart be light." Imagine, for a moment, the sound of the reed pen in that ancient room, a soft, dry whisper, steady as snowfall. Imagine the lamp's faint oil scent, the cool stone beneath bare feet, the distant river moving like a long exhale. If your mind wants to picture anything tonight, let it picture that. Simple, safe, unchanging. And if pictures fade, that's fine too. Your breathing can be the only image for you to rest in. He closes his eyes for one moment, as if he is tasting the words rather than thinking them. They do not feel foreign, they feel familiar, in the way a lullaby feels familiar, even if you don't know its origin. Because calm is a language the body understands. In the candlelit museum room, Etienne repeats the line again, very quietly. Let your mouth be gentle. Let your waters be smooth. Let your heart be light. You might notice what happens when you hear it. The jaw loosens a fraction, the chest widens a fraction. The air in the room, your room, feels slightly less crowded. Nothing dramatic, just a small easing, like a knot loosening in a scarf. On the slip, the spiral appears again, this time drawn beside a tiny rectangle, the house sign, spiral and house, returning and shelter, a path that curls inward, not outward, a reminder that the safest place is not always a far destination. Sometimes it is an inner room you can enter with a single breath. Etienne's fingers hover above the spiral. He thinks of how people in every age have searched for a way to come home to themselves. Some walked long roads, some built temples, some wrote songs, some, quietly, wrote little sequences of words on papyrus so that a tired person could read them by lamplight. And if you are tired tonight, this slip is also for you. If your thoughts keep looping, let them loop gently, without grabbing you. If your worries return, let them return like waves and let them leave again. In and out. The candle flame lowers slightly, as if it too is growing sleepy. Etienne adds no new candle. He lets the light be modest. The scroll does not need brightness. It needs steadiness. He studies the boat sign on the slip. The boat appears in many Egyptian texts because the Nile shaped everything: travel, trade, seasons, daily work. But the boat here feels symbolic, like the breath itself, moving, carrying, returning. Beside the boat is the star sign, and beneath it a short line written in smaller symbols, almost like an aside. Etienne leans closer and finds the mouth sign once more, then a symbol that suggests to listen, then the feather. Speak less, listen more, be light. He smiles, not because it is clever, but because it is true. The older he becomes, the more he understands that peace is often not created by adding things, but by removing pressure, by letting the world be a little quieter, by letting the inner voice be kinder. He copies the slip into his notebook line by line, leaving generous spaces between phrases. He is careful to preserve the repetition, because repetition is the soft rail that keeps a sleepy mind from slipping into sharp corners. As he writes, the imagined house of life returns again, this time as a corridor at night. The temple is asleep, the courtyard is empty, only one lamp burns in a back room where a scribe sits alone. The scribe is older now, his hands are steady but slower. He has seen seasons pass. He has watched children become adults. He has buried friends. He has learned that life is not always gentle, but that gentleness can still be practiced. Tonight, he writes the same sequence on a small slip. Not for the king, not for the priests, but for someone he loves, perhaps a student, perhaps a sibling, perhaps himself. He writes it because he knows that the mind needs something to hold when the night is long. He folds the slip and tucks it inside a larger scroll, the way you tuck a note into a book so you can find it later. A private lantern for a future reader. And now, centuries later, that lantern has reached Etienne's table. The thought makes him sit very still. Somewhere in the museum, a clock ticks, but the sound is distant and soft, as if time itself has agreed to speak quietly tonight. Etienne returns to the practical world for a moment. He looks at the misfiled label on the wooden chest. He looks at the number 318. He looks at the curator's letter. The path becomes clearer. The scroll was always meant to be grouped with calming texts, but it drifted into the wrong drawer, as objects sometimes do. Nothing sinister, just the gentle chaos of human systems. And yet he feels grateful for the mistake, because the rediscovery has made him listen more closely. It has made the story feel personal, like finding a forgotten coat in a closet and realizing it still carries the warmth of an old winter. He decides to create a new entry, one that will not be misfiled again. He writes carefully in the museum ledger, choosing words that are simple and kind. Papyrus, calming utterances. Heka as gentle speech. For nighttime reading. He pauses, then adds one more line, almost like a prayer. May it bring rest to whoever finds it next. He closes the ledger softly. Then he returns to the table and unrolls the main scroll a little farther, searching for where the slip belonged. He finds a matching crease, a subtle gap in the fibers. The slip fits there like a missing leaf returning to a book. When he places it back, the symbols align. The spiral meets the star, the boat meets the waterlines, the feather rests beneath the heart sign. The sequence becomes whole again, not through force, but through gentle belonging. And in that quiet moment, under the steady candle, Etienne feels a soft certainty. This scroll is not about controlling the world. It is about returning again and again to balance. He sits, listening to the stillness he has helped create. And in that stillness, he notices something at the far end of the newly revealed column. A new doorway sign, larger than the others, drawn with care. Inside the doorway is a simple image, a corridor of small lights like candles receding into darkness, a hallway, a path, a next room. Etienne's heart makes that warm shift again, curiosity without urgency. He leans closer, ready to read what waits beyond the doorway, and the night, patient and kind, leans with him. The doorway drawn on the papyrus is simple, just a rectangle, a threshold, yet the scribe has given it extra care. The lines are smoother, the edges more deliberate, as if this particular door matters. Inside the doorway are tiny flames, not one flame, but many, arranged in a gentle line that recedes into the distance. Little lights, calm and patient, like candles placed along a corridor so no one has to walk in darkness. Etienne feels the room around him soften again, even though nothing physical changes. The museum is still the museum, the shelves are still shelves, the candle still burns, but the paper on his table is offering him another room to enter. And if you are listening now, perhaps it offers you the same thing, a corridor of small lights, a path that does not demand courage, only willingness, a place where you can move forward slowly, one breath at a time. Inhale, as if you are stepping toward the first candle. Exhale, as if you are letting the shadows behind you rest. Etienne reads the line beneath the doorway sign. The symbols are familiar now: mouth, water, feather, then the star and boat, then unexpectedly a symbol that resembles a folded cloth. Linen, warm, clean, simple. The line feels like a quiet instruction, something you might whisper to yourself while turning down a lamp. Wrap the heart in linen. Let the breath be steady. Walk the corridor of light. Etienne copies it into his notebook, leaving wide spaces between the phrases, as if he wants the page to breathe too. His handwriting becomes slower, more rounded, as though the papyrus is teaching him its pace. He pauses and listens, not to anything dramatic, only to the small music of the room, the candle's faint hiss, the soft rasp of pen on paper, the building's almost inaudible settling. It is the kind of soundscape that makes the mind stop scanning for danger and start trusting the night. For a long moment he does nothing but sit there, and in that stillness the corridor begins to open in his imagination. He sees it not as a European hallway, but as an Egyptian one, cool stone underfoot, walls painted in muted tones, the air touched with incense, so light it feels more like memory than smoke. Lamps sit in shallow niches, their flames sheltered by the curve of clay. Each light is modest. Each light is enough. The corridor leads deeper into a temple complex, but it does not feel like a place of fear. It feels like a place of rhythm. Night in Egypt is different, Etienne knows, even if he has never been there. He has read descriptions, the heat lifting, the desert becoming a velvet bowl for stars, the river turning black and glossy, the palm fronds whispering together like old friends. And now, as he looks at the papyrus, he feels the night of that land arriving in the museum room, gentle as a breeze through an open window. The corridor of lights leads to a chamber that is not grand. It is intimate, like a study. A place where a person can sit and breathe and remember their place in the wider order of things. On the papyrus, the next symbol is a small seated figure with hands resting on knees. Not a king, not a god, just a human in the posture of stillness. Then comes the feather again, balance, truth, lightness, then a ripple of water, calm, and then, in red ink, small and restrained, the familiar guiding phrase appears once more. Etienne's eyes rest on it the way your eyes might rest on the last light in a house before sleep. He does not feel excitement, he feels steadiness. This is the text pattern. Guide the tired mind, then let it settle, then guide again. He turns another page in his reference book and finds a note from a scholar who described texts like this as utterances for aligning the inner self with Ma'at. The scholar's words are dry, practical, academic, but behind them Etienne senses the living truth. These were not only museum pieces, they were used, they were spoken. They were held close on nights when a person needed to feel safe. He looks down at the corridor sign again and thinks of how many nights humans have had, how many evenings with heavy hearts, how many dawns arrived after worry, how many times someone stared at a ceiling and wished their thoughts would stop running. Perhaps the ancient Egyptians were not so different from you. They had work, they had family, they had the unpredictability of floods and drought, they had grief, they had love, they had long stretches of ordinary life, the kind that quietly wears a person down, and they also had small practices for returning. A phrase repeated under the breath, a lamp lit and placed in a niche, a slow walk through a corridor of small lights, letting each step say, I am here, I am safe. I will be gentle with myself. If you need that practice tonight, you can borrow it. Imagine your own inner corridor. Imagine one small light near your chest, not bright, not demanding, just enough. Now imagine a second light and a third, each one a breath, each one a soft yes to rest. In the imagined temple, a person enters the corridor wearing simple linen. The cloth is cool against the skin. The person's feet are bare, the stone pleasantly cold. Their shoulders are slightly hunched from the day, but as they walk, the hunch eases. The corridor seems to carry weight away, not by force, but by invitation. At the end of the corridor is a low room with a bowl of water placed on a small table. The water is still, reflecting the lamp flame above it. A feather rests beside the bowl, pale and quiet. The person sits. They look into the water. They do not search for visions. They simply watch how calm looks. Then they speak. Not loudly, not theatrically, just a few words, measured, kind, steady, words that make the mind stop gripping. Let my waters be smooth. And as the words leave the mouth, the breath follows them out, long and slow like the river at night. Back in the museum, Etienne's own breath lengthens. He realizes he has been breathing shallowly for most of the day, as people do without noticing, breathing like they are always about to hurry, always about to respond, always about to begin something urgent. Now, guided by the scroll, he breathes differently. He breathes like someone who is allowed to stop. He reads further. The papyrus now describes, not in a rigid list but in gentle images, a sequence of small acts. Wash the hands, cool the forehead, light a lamp, name what is heavy, release what is not needed. It is almost like a bedtime routine from another millennium, written with poetic patience. In the margin, the scribe has drawn a small jar and a droplet. Oil, the fuel for lamps. The scribe seems to be saying, even light needs care, even calm needs a small offering. Not a grand sacrifice, just attention, just a little oil in the lamp, just a little kindness in the words. Etienne thinks of modern life and how quickly it drains the oil, how screens and deadlines and noise can leave a person feeling dry. He feels grateful that this scroll is reminding him, you can refill. You can top up the lamp, you can return. He unrolls another section and sees a different motif. A boat travelling under stars, the oar dipping in water lines. Beneath the boat is a phrase written in a slightly different hand, perhaps added later by another scribe. Do not race the river, let it carry you. Etienne's pen stops. He reads it twice. Do not race the river, let it carry you. If you have been racing your own life, racing your thoughts, racing your plans, let this line be your permission slip tonight. You can stop racing. You can let the current carry you towards sleep. The museum candle has burned lower now, its flame smaller, its light softer. The edges of the room are darker, but the darkness feels friendly, like a blanket drawn up to the chin. Etienne is aware of time, but not in a pressured way. He knows he will have to close the drawers again, lock the room, leave the papyrus safely wrapped. But he also knows nothing is urgent in this story. The scroll has waited centuries. It can wait a few more minutes. It can wait for another night. He reads the next line beneath the corridor sign, and something in it surprises him with its gentleness. A symbol that resembles a small child, a symbol for mother, or perhaps nurse. A cup, a phrase that suggests soothing. It is as if the scroll is admitting openly that comfort is not only for the powerful. Comfort is for anyone who breathes. Comfort is for ordinary people. Comfort is for the tired. He feels a warmth in his eyes again. He is not sentimental, he is simply human. And then, as he unrolls one more inch, he reaches the edge of a new section marked by a small heading in red ink. Only two signs, neat and centered like a chapter title. One sign is the star, the other is the spiral. Follow the star, return by the spiral. A map, not of geography, but of inner movement, outward to the vastness, inward to the heart. Etienne's fingers hover over the heading. He senses that beyond it, the scroll will widen into something larger, perhaps a story, perhaps an origin, perhaps the name of the person who wrote these calm words and placed them in a corridor of lights. Somewhere, beyond the stone walls, the Nile continues its slow song. Even if you can't hear it, your body remembers water, steady, patient, returning again and again. He takes a slow breath, as if he is stepping over the threshold again, and the night, generous and quiet, holds the door open for him. Etienne lets his fingertip hover above the red heading, as if he is warming his hand over a small flame. The star and the spiral sit together, vastness and return, like two gentle instructions that do not contradict each other. One says, "Look outward and remember how wide the world is." The other says, "Come inward and remember you have a home inside you." He takes a slow breath and unrolls the papyrus past the heading. The script that follows is slightly larger, as if the scribe wanted the reader to relax their eyes. The symbols are spaced like stepping stones in shallow water. Between them are little pockets of blank papyrus, places where silence can live. Etienne reads the first line and feels the words arrive, not as information, but as atmosphere. "Lift your gaze to the undecided sky," the line seems to say. Not a sky that threatens, a sky that simply exists, wide enough to hold your worries without reacting to them. He looks up from the table and for a moment at the museum ceiling. It is plain plaster, softly stained by years, yet his mind replaces it easily with a different ceiling, one made of night, made of stars, made of calm. In the imagined temple corridor, the small lights are still burning. The lamps in their niches make warm pools against cool stone. A person walks slowly, breath matching footsteps, and at each pool of light their shoulders loosen a little more. The papyrus continues, a star sign, a water ripple, a feather, a seated figure. Etienne whispers the sequence under his breath, letting it become a rhythm rather than a puzzle. Star, water, feather, stillness. Then, beneath the line, the scribe has drawn a simple scene, a roof terrace above the temple, open to the sky, a low wall, a small stool, a jar of water, a lamp, and a person sitting with their hands resting lightly on their knees. A night watcher, perhaps. Someone who stays awake while others sleep. Someone who knows the mind's tricks in the dark, how it can replay the day, how it can rehearse tomorrow, how it can wander into old grief when the house is quiet. The drawing is calm, almost tender. It feels like the scribe is saying, if you are awake at night, you are not wrong. You are not broken. You are simply human. Here is what you can do. Etienne senses a soft discovery forming, the kind that does not jolt you awake. This scroll, he realizes, may not have been meant for grand ceremonies at all. It may have been meant for ordinary nights, for people who needed steadiness more than spectacle. The next line offers a practice, written with the simplicity of a recipe. Sit where the air can touch your forehead. Keep water within reach. Light one flame, not many. Let your breath be the boat. The symbols themselves are humble, a head, a breeze sign, a small jar, a flame, a boat, a ripple line. Nothing theatrical, nothing sharp, a gentle set of reminders for a tired body. If you'd like, you can borrow one of them now. Let your breath be the boat. Inhale and imagine the boat gliding forward on dark water. Exhale and imagine the water smoothing behind it. No effort, no urgency, just movement that is allowed to be slow. Etienne continues reading, and the scroll begins to speak more personally. The tone changes in a way he cannot fully explain, but he can feel it. The lines are less formal, more intimate, as if the scribe is no longer copying tradition, but offering counsel to a friend. A phrase appears that Etienne recognizes from other Egyptian texts, a word that can mean heart, but also mind, the inner seat of feeling and thought. The scribe addresses it gently. O heart, do not run ahead of your feet. O heart, do not drink the future too quickly. O heart, return, return. The repetition is like a lullaby. Return, return. The spiral again, but spoken. Etienne's pen slows. He copies the repeated word return in French beside it, and then in English too, because the index card began in English. He likes how the word looks in both languages, like a bridge between rooms. Return, revenir. The scroll goes on and a name appears, not a king's name, not a god's name, a scribe's name, written modestly near the margin, as if he did not want to interrupt the calm of the main text. Etienne leans closer. He traces the signs with his eyes. He consults the reference book, then the tracing sheet from box 318. Slowly, patiently, he assembles a sound. Padak, he begins. Then another sign, Amun. Padi Amun. Given by Amun, Etienne murmurs, an ordinary kind of name in a world where people carried devotion the way they carried water, daily, quietly, without performance. In his imagination, Padi Amun becomes a person, someone who learned to write in the house of life, who grew into the role of keeper, who watched nights pass over the river. He is not an action hero, he is a craftsman of calm. Etienne imagines him as a young scribe first, sitting with other students, copying columns until his wrist aches. The teacher moves behind them, correcting a line here, smoothing a curve there, teaching that beauty in writing is a kind of kindness to the reader. Then, years later, Padi Amun sits on the roof terrace drawn in the scroll. The city below is quiet, the river reflects the stars, the lamp beside him burns low. He is writing these utterances not for fame, but for function, for the weary moments that visit every human life. A new symbol appears, a small ear, then a mouth, then the feather. Listen, then speak, then be light. Etienne smiles at the gentle order. He thinks of modern nights filled with talking, news, opinions, arguments, and how the mind can feel raw from noise. The ancient instruction is simple. Listen first, speak only what calms. Let your words be light enough to leave no bruise. The scroll offers another line, and Etienne feels it settle into him like warm tea. Do not make the night heavier with your tongue. Make it softer. In the museum room, he realizes he has been speaking to himself harshly lately. Tiny inner comments, quick judgments, pressure disguised as motivation. He sees with sudden tenderness that he does not have to do that. Not tonight. The papyrus continues with images rather than doctrines. A hand pouring water, a hand touching the chest, a small lamp, a feather, a star. It is a sequence of gentle anchors. Water for the body, touch for the heart, light for the mind, vastness for perspective, balance for everything in between. Then, at the edge of a column, Etienne finds something like a small map. Not a geographic map with roads and borders, but a diagram of movement, a spiral leading inward, a star above, and between them a series of tiny flames, like the corridor again. Beside the diagram, the scribe has written a line that feels almost like a promise. Even in darkness there are small lights. Etienne reads it twice. The words are so simple, yet so complete. Even in darkness there are small lights. The candle on Etienne's table is one of them. The papyrus is another. Your own breath may be another, steady and quiet, continuing even when the mind forgets to be grateful for it. He unrolls a little more, and a short section begins that feels like a story within the practice. The symbols depict a traveller arriving at a temple at night. The traveller's shoulders are low with fatigue, his sandals are dusty. He has walked far. The temple keeper does not interrogate him. He does not demand payment or proof. He simply offers water and points gently To the corridor of small lights, the traveller walks it slowly. He sits beneath the stars, he speaks the calming words, and the traveller's breath becomes smooth again. Etienne's eyes soften. He feels the scroll's humanity. This is not a tale of domination, it is a tale of care. In the margin, Paddy Amun has written a small note, almost playful in its simplicity. If you forget the words, follow the lights. Etienne laughs silently, just a small breath of amusement, because it feels like something a real person would write, not a mythic figure carved from stone, a reminder that you don't have to be perfect, you only have to keep returning. He sits back, letting the night in the museum deepen. The candle's flame is smaller now, its light more intimate. The shadows around the cabinets look like folded fabric, soft and harmless. Etienne glances at the curator's letter again. Some words were made for the night, and he understands why. The day wants efficiency. The day wants display, but the night wants gentleness, and these utterances belong to the night. He turns his notebook to a new page and writes a heading of his own. The corridor practice. Under it, he lists the sequence as he understands it. Water, light, breath, star, feather, return. Then at the bottom he writes one more line for himself. If the heart is heavy, make the words lighter. He closes the notebook softly. And then he notices something he hasn't noticed before. The ink on the papyrus changes shade in the next section. It is still brown, still calm, but slightly different, as if another hand took over, or as if the text moved into a different period of copying. A second scribe, a second voice. The name Paddy Amun appears again, but now it is preceded by another phrase. A title perhaps, or a dedication. Written for, the symbols suggest, written for someone, a person with a name that begins with the sign of a lotus. Etienne leans closer, the soft curiosity returning, the kind that keeps you listening without waking you. The lotus sign blooms on the papyrus in candlelight, quiet, pale, and full of promise. The lotus sign blooms on the papyrus in candlelight, quiet, pale, and full of promise. Etienne has seen lotus carved into stone and painted on fragments of wood, but here it feels more personal, almost tender, as if a flower has been pressed into a book by someone who wanted to remember a gentler day. He leans closer. The air near the table is warm. The rest of the room is cool, like a chapel at night. The candle's flame is smaller now, steady and faithful. And the scroll, unrolled a little farther, offers a line that begins with the lotus and ends with a heart sign. Written for the one whose name opens like a flower. Etienne does not rush to pronounce it. He lets the symbols sit in his mind the way you let a familiar song begin, humming before the lyrics arrive. He consults the tracing sheet again, then the scholar's notes, then returns to the papyrus itself. In the end, he decides to keep the name as a feeling more than a certainty. Lotus Heart, he writes in his notebook, gently in English. Then beneath it, he writes something softer. For the tired one. Because that is what the line seems to carry, like water in a clay cup. Not an announcement to the world, but a dedication. A private offering, a warm blanket folded and placed at the edge of the bed. If you are listening tonight with a tired heart, you can let that dedication include you too, not in a dramatic way, only in the quiet way that a sentence can become a small shelter. Inhale, slowly, exhale, longer. Let your breath be the boat and let the river carry you. The scroll continues and the second voice becomes clearer. The handwriting is slightly rounder, less formal, as if the scribe's wrist softened with age or affection. The lines are still careful, but they feel less like instruction and more like companionship. It speaks of the lotus as a daily miracle, how it closes at night and opens in the morning, lifting itself from dark water without struggle. How the flower does not argue with the river, it simply follows its rhythm. Night, then morning, closing, then opening, rest, then light. To Etienne, the image lands like medicine. He thinks of the modern habit of forcing the mind to stay open, open to work, open to news, open to endless messages, long after the day has ended. The lotus offers a different lesson. There is wisdom in closing. There is safety in folding inward. There is healing in letting the petals rest. On the papyrus, the scribe writes a sequence that Etienne can almost hear, spoken aloud on a roof terrace beneath stars. Close the mind like the lotus. Keep the lamp like a small sun. Let the waters be smooth. Return, return. The repetition again. Return, return, like a mother's hand rubbing slow circles on a child's back. Like a metronome for the nervous system. Like a whisper that says, "You are allowed to come home." Etienne pauses to copy the line, spacing the words widely, leaving little pools of blankness between them. He notices how his own shoulders have dropped, how his jaw has softened, how even the muscles around his eyes feel less tight. He wonders what Lotus Heart, whoever they were, felt when they first heard these utterances. Perhaps they were someone who had trouble sleeping. Perhaps they were someone carrying grief. Perhaps they were simply a person living a full life, and fullness can become heavy. In the imagined temple complex, he sees Lotus Heart as a figure wrapped in linen, walking the corridor of small lights. The lamps in the niches cast warm circles on stone. Each circle is a place to pause. Each pause is a permission slip. Lotus Heart reaches the roof terrace. The stars are bright. The river is dark. The air is cool enough to feel on the forehead. A jar of water waits beside a lamp. A feather rests near the bowl, pale as moonlight. Lotus Heart sits and speaks the first line softly, like a pebble dropped into still water. Let my mouth be gentle. The second line follows just as softly. Let my waters be smooth. Then the third, slower, as if spoken directly to the chest. Let my heart be light. The night accepts the words without comment. The stars do not judge. The river does not hurry. The lamp flame stays steady, small, enough. Back in the museum, Etienne turns another page in box 318's notes. He finds a paragraph written by a different hand, perhaps the curator again, perhaps an assistant. The handwriting is neat, but the tone is unexpectedly warm. These utterances resemble a bedtime practice, it says in French. They appear to guide the reader from agitation to stillness using images of water, light, and the lotus. There is no menace, only comfort. Etienne underlines the words no menace, only comfort. Then he returns to the papyrus and reads on. The second voice, Padiaman perhaps, or someone close to him, begins to speak about time, not in numbers, not in dates, but in rhythms. Time as tide, time as breath, time as the turning of the sky. The text offers a thought that feels gentle enough to carry into sleep. What returns is not lost. The lotus returns, the sun returns, the river returns, and you too can return again and again to the quieter part of yourself. If your mind has wandered tonight, that is normal. Minds wander the way smoke wanders. You do not have to chase it. You can simply return to the breath, as if stepping back into the corridor of small lights. In a little slower, out a little softer. The papyrus then describes a small moment, so ordinary it feels almost modern. Lotus Heart sits on the terrace and hears distant sounds from the city. A dog barking once, someone laughing softly, the faint clink of a jar. For a second, the mind tries to follow those sounds to assemble a story. Then the utterance arrives like a hand on the shoulder. Do not build a house out of noise. Build a house out of breath. Etienne's pen stops. He writes the line in his notebook because it feels like something worth keeping even outside the museum, even outside Egypt, even outside history. Do not build a house out of noise. Build a house out of breath. He sits with it. The room is quiet. The candle is low. His own breathing becomes the only movement he can feel. The scroll continues with another image. A boat under stars, yes, but now the boat is empty. No rower, no passenger, just a vessel drifting on waterlines guided by the star above it. It is a simple drawing, but Etienne understands its softness immediately. Sometimes you do not have to steer. Sometimes you can let yourself be carried. Sleep is like that. You do not force it. You allow it. A red phrase appears again, small, restrained, and beneath it the scribe writes, "Release the oar." Etienne exhales, long and full, as if he has been holding something all day without knowing. Release the oar. Let the river carry you. He closes his eyes briefly, and in that brief darkness he sees a memory from his own childhood. A summer evening, a warm room, his mother folding laundry, humming without words. He had forgotten the scene for years, yet here it returns, called up by the softness of linen and the rhythm of repetition. The scroll seems to know this too. That calm invites memory, and memory can be a quiet kind of immortality. On the papyrus, the second voice offers one more dedication line, for Lotus Heart, when the night feels long. Etienne copies it. Then he notices a small mark beside the dedication, a tiny impression, as if a seal was pressed there, or as if something sticky once held an object in place. Carefully, he examines the spot. In the candlelight, he can see the faint outline of a wax residue, almost invisible. It suggests that once, long ago, something was attached here, perhaps a small amulet, perhaps a strip of linen, perhaps a dried lotus petal. A petal, he thinks, a real petal, a human touch. The idea makes the story feel closer, not a museum distance, but a bedside distance. Someone once tucked a flower into these words, as if saying, "May this be gentle enough to sleep beside." Etienne turns the scroll slightly, and a final line at the bottom of the column catches the light. It is written sideways like a private note meant to be found only by the patient reader. It says simply, "If you cannot sleep, read the corridor again." And beneath that a small spiral, "Return by the spiral, follow the star." Etienne smiles and his curiosity stays soft because he feels the next section will tell him where the corridor begins, where, in the real landscape of Egypt, Padi Amun learned these calm words, and why he chose to write them for Lotus Heart. He knows the falcon not as a threat, but as a sky-breathing presence, a bird that rides invisible currents, patient and awake, seeing wide distances without needing to hurry. In the ancient imagination, the falcon was a reminder that the horizon is larger than any single worry, that the mind can rise above its own noise and rest in a broader view. Etienne lets that image settle in him. A steady wing, a slow circle, a quiet return to balance. If you like, picture it too, high over the river, over the lamps, over the sleeping roofs, watching without judging, simply keeping gentle witness. Below, lamps glow along a temple wall, and a person walks without fear, guided by small lights. The night is wide and still kind to you. He unrolls one more inch, and a new heading appears, drawn in red ink, centered and neat. It is a place name, a temple name, and the first symbol is unmistakable. a falcon. The red heading sits centered on the papyrus like a quiet signpost. Etienne can feel, without fully understanding why, that this is not merely a new section. It is a new air, a different room, a wider sky. The first symbol is the falcon. Clean lines, a steady beak, a posture that suggests patience more than power. Beneath it is a shape that looks like a house, then a tall standard, then a small circle like a sun sitting low on the edge of the world. A place name, yes, but also an image. A falcon house beneath a wide horizon. Etienne reads the heading again, very softly, as if speaking it could disturb the paper's sleep. He consults the scholar's notes, letting his eyes move slowly across the printed lines. One margin note points to a temple city far upriver, a place Europeans have begun to describe in letters and travel accounts. Edfu, the city of the falcon, where a great temple stands like a calm ship of stone. Etienne does not let the name become a spark of excitement. He lets it become a candle, steady, warm, enough to see by. Edfu, a temple of Horus, the falcon who watches the horizon. He looks down at the corridor of small lights drawn earlier, and he senses the scroll's gentle logic. These calming utterances are not floating in abstraction. They belong somewhere. They were written under a particular sky, in the shade of particular columns, in the slow company of a river that made time feel cyclical and trustworthy. The museum room remains quiet, yet, as Etienne unrolls the papyrus past the falcon heading, the air seems to cool in his imagination, as though the stone of a temple corridor has moved closer. The smell of paper and cedar becomes, for a moment, the smell of limestone warmed by day and cooled by night. If you are listening, you can let the story widen without leaving your bed. You are safe. You are still here. And your mind can wander like a lantern drifting across water, never lost, always held by breath. Inhale, and let the horizon open. Exhale, and let your shoulders soften. The scroll begins to describe Edfu in images rather than measurements. A river bend, reeds whispering, a walkway of stone, lamps in niches. The same corridor motif returns, but now it has context. The corridor is not only inside the mind, it also exists as architecture. Temple hallways built to guide the body slowly from bright day into cool, steady night. Etienne imagines arriving there, not as a conqueror, not as a tourist hungry for spectacle, but as a weary traveler who wants the quiet of stone and shadow. The river carries him in thought along dark water. The stars above the Nile are different from the stars above Paris, yet they feel like the same family, distant lights doing their patient work. The boat glides toward a landing. The air smells of wet reeds and faint incense. Somewhere, a priest is closing a door. Somewhere else, a woman sings to a child. The sound is small, carried briefly, then swallowed by night. At Edfu, the temple rises in the darkness like a cliff made gentle. Its walls are tall, not menacing, simply steady. Relief carvings cover the stone, falcons, suns, boats, flowers, stories pressed into limestone so that time cannot easily erase them. Etienne has read that this temple, like many in Egypt, is a library of carved breath. Not all words were written on papyrus. Many were written in stone, so the daily sun could read them too. Yet the scroll on his table is not stone. It is softer, more intimate. It is the kind of text you can hold close, the kind you can read by lamplight when the day's noise has made your mind raw. The papyrus offers a gentle scene, a small room inside the temple complex, cooler than the courtyard, protected from wind. A shelf holds jars of ink. A reed pen rests on a mat. A bowl of water sits near a lamp. And there, Drawn with a modest line is the lotus again, as if to say, even here, in the falcon city, the flower of rest opens. Then the text speaks about the falcon, but not as a creature of fear. The falcon is described as a witness to cycles, dawn arriving, dusk arriving, the river rising and receding, the mind tightening and loosening. In the ancient sense, Horus is not only a god above people, he is a symbol of clear sight, of the ability to see far without panic. Etienne feels something settle in him. Clear sight without panic. That sounds like the kind of mind we long for at night. The scroll's second voice, rounder, more personal, returns. The name Padiamun appears again, and beneath it, a line that reads like a simple confession. I learned these words where the falcon watches. Etienne copies the line. He imagines Padiamun as a younger man arriving at Edfu for study, perhaps sent by a teacher from another temple, perhaps traveling with a small bundle of linen and a jar of ink. He imagines him walking through the outer gateway at dusk, the carvings catching the last gold of sun. The river wind cools his forehead, his chest carries both excitement and fatigue, the gentle kind, like a long day's walk. Inside, the house of life is quieter than the public halls. There, the scribes practice their craft. They copy lists and hymns and healing texts, yes, but they also copy what the scroll calls utterances of balance, words designed to steady the inner life the way a plumb line steadies a wall. A teacher speaks to Padiamun in a low voice. Do not write to impress the living, the teacher says. Write to comfort the tired. The phrase feels so modern it makes Etienne smile. Comfort the tired. As if the scribe's true audience is not a king or a crowd, but a single person awake at night, listening to their own heart. The scroll then gives a small, beautiful detail that the temple lamps were tended with care, not for brightness, but for steadiness. Oil was measured, wicks were trimmed, smoke was kept low. Light was treated like a guest who should not be startled. That gentleness of light is the same gentleness of speech. Heka here is not a storm, it is a lamp. Etienne pauses and notices the lamp in his own room, the candle on the table. He feels a quiet gratitude for its steadiness. He feels, too, the kindness of the ancient scribes who understood that the nervous system is soothed by small consistencies, a repeating phrase, a familiar image, a steady flame. The papyrus describes a nightly practice at Edfu. A person, sometimes a novice priest, sometimes a weary worker from the riverside, comes to the temple wall where a corridor of small lamps burns. They do not enter the deepest sanctuaries, they do not disturb the sleeping statues, they simply walk the corridor slowly, letting each niche of light become a breath. At the end of the corridor is a terrace open to the sky. The falcon carved above the doorway seems to face the horizon. The person sits and speaks the calming utterances, mouth gentle, waters smooth, heart light. Then they look up at the stars until their thoughts stop gripping. No one forces them to believe anything. No one scares them into devotion. The practice is offered like water. Drink if you wish. Etienne reads this and feels his own body respond. A small uncoiling, a sense that he too could be guided by lamps, even if his lamps are only the dim light of a bedside clock and the steady rise and fall of breath. The scroll then returns to Lotus Heart, the one for whom these words were written. It suggests that Lotus Heart travelled to Edfu once, or at least dreamed of it. The lotus name is paired with the star and the spiral again, outward and inward, like a reminder. You can travel by imagination when your feet cannot go. In the margin, Padiamun writes a line that feels like a hand extended across the centuries. If you cannot reach the falcon temple, let the falcon live in your breath. Etienne whispers it. The sentence does not demand faith, it only offers imagery. Breathe as if a wide, calm horizon is inside you. See far, but do not rush. Watch your thoughts the way a falcon watches water, quietly, without swooping. He unrolls another inch, and a new illustration appears. 2 small hands holding a bowl. Above the bowl is the feather. Above the feather is the star. The image is simple, but its meaning is soft and deep. Hold calm as if it were water. Keep it light. Let it be guided by vastness. The candle flame dips, then steadies. Etienne realizes he is approaching the end of this section. The scroll's ink grows slightly lighter, as if the scribe's brush was running low, or as if night itself was thinning the darkness of the letters. The last line beneath the falcon heading is written in red, smaller than before, almost shy. It says, in the gentlest possible way, "Sleep is the most faithful return." Perhaps that is why the ancients trusted repetition, not to control the night, but to befriend it. One lamp, then another, one breath, then another, the same kind sentence until the mind stops scanning and simply floats in the river of quietness. Etienne sits very still. The museum feels like a temple now, not because of superstition, but because of quiet. Because of the sense that in every age humans have built places, rooms, corridors, words, where the tired can be carried back to themselves. He looks again at the corridor of small lights on the papyrus, and he senses the next part will move deeper, not into mystery, but into meaning. What happens when you practice these utterances night after night, and how the smallest words, repeated kindly, can change the shape of a life. He closes his eyes for one breath, then opens them, and unrolls the scroll toward the next gentle room. Part 11. The practice that softens time. The candle on Etienne's table has grown shorter, the way a thought grows smaller when you stop feeding it. Its flame is still steady, but it sits closer to the brass holder now, and the light around it feels more intimate, as if the room has drawn its curtains. Etienne keeps reading. Not with the hunger of a scholar racing toward certainty, but with the gentleness of someone listening for comfort. He has stopped trying to conquer the scroll. He is letting the scroll teach him how to move. The falcon heading is behind him now, and the papyrus has entered a quieter tone. The symbols repeat in slow cycles: mouth, water, feather, star, boat, spiral, lotus, heart, return, like waves that do not argue with the shore. And each time the pattern comes back, Etienne feels his body respond before his mind does. The shoulders descend, the jaw releases, the breath becomes longer, smoother, almost unnoticed. If you are listening tonight with tired eyes, you might feel something similar. A gradual softening that does not demand effort. It is simply a return to what the body already knows. In and out. A long, patient tide. The scroll begins to speak, not about temples or names, but about ordinary evenings. It describes a person coming home after work, washing dust from their hands, dimming the lamp, speaking a few calming lines before lying down. There is no triumph in the scene, no dramatic rescue, only the quiet dignity of tending the self. Etienne's pen hovers above his notebook. He writes a phrase that seems to summarize the entire scroll in one gentle truth. Calm is a habit. He underlines it once, lightly, as if a heavy line would be too much. Calm is a habit, like brushing your teeth, like locking the door, like turning down the lights. Not a grand enlightenment, not a sudden transformation, but a practice that grows reliable with repetition. The papyrus seems to agree. The next section tells a small story about a man whose mind could not sleep. Night after night he lay awake, listening to his own thoughts until his chest felt tight and the darkness felt crowded. One evening, he visited a corridor of lamps at the temple wall. He walked slowly, counting lights the way one counts breaths. He spoke the utterance for smooth waters. He listened to his own exhale, and he did not sleep immediately. The scroll is honest about that. It does not promise instant miracles. It simply says, he returned the next night, and the next, and the next. Each time, the mind loosened a little sooner. Each time, the body trusted the routine a little more. Eventually, sleep began to arrive the way dawn arrives, without being forced. Etienne reads this and feels soothed by the honesty. Modern life sells quick fixes, sharp slogans, sudden solutions. The scroll offers something older and kinder, slow change through gentle repetition. He looks again at the spiral symbol, not a straight line, not a race, but a return that circles inward, finding the same places again and again, each time with a little more softness. The papyrus then speaks of time in a way Etienne recognizes with a quiet awe. It says that time is not only the march of days, it is also the way the heart learns, the way memory settles, the way a sentence can live inside you long after it is spoken. Words are seeds, it suggests. You plant them in the mind with breath, and they grow into weather. This is the soft discovery that lands like a warm cloth, that Heka, in its gentlest form, is the art of planting helpful words so the inner climate becomes calmer. Not power over the world, but care for the inner sky. Etienne thinks of the sentences that have changed him. A teacher once said quietly, "You have time." A friend once whispered, "I'm here." His mother once murmured, "Rest now." Those were not spells in the dramatic sense, yet they shaped his life more than any lecture. He writes another line in his notebook. Kind words outlast the night. The candle flickers once, then steadies, as if agreeing. The scroll continues, describing how the ancient reader might speak the utterances. It suggests a low voice, not to impress anyone, but to keep the nervous system gentle. It recommends speaking the phrases only once or twice, then letting silence do the rest. It reminds the reader, if you speak too much, you wake yourself. If you speak just enough, you soften. Etienne smiles, the scroll understands sleep. He tries it quietly, in French first, then in English, because the word peace on the index card still glows in his mind. Let my mouth be gentle, let my waters be smooth, let my heart be light. He speaks so softly that the air barely moves, yet something in him shifts anyway. The phrases do not perform, they settle. If you want, you can borrow them now, not as a ritual you must do correctly, but as a simple kindness you can offer yourself. You can even think them instead of saying them. Mouth gentle, waters smooth, heart light. The papyrus then offers a final image from the house of life. A teacher placing a hand on a student's shoulder and saying, "Do not fear the night is where the mind is cleaned." The teacher points to a bowl of water and a small lamp, and the student learns that darkness is not emptiness. It is a space where the inner noise can drain away. Etienne's eyes soften again. He thinks of how often people treat the night as an enemy to conquer, a problem to solve. The scroll treats night as a room to enter, a room with small lights and steady breath, a place where no one has to be perfect, a place where you can be unfinished and still be safe. The museum feels very quiet now. The shelves are shadows. The cabinets have become silhouettes. The candle is a small star on the table, and the papyrus is a river of ink beneath it. Etienne checks the time, not with alarm, but with gentle responsibility. He knows he must close the room soon. He must return the scroll to its linen, return the bundles to drawer 318, record his notes properly so the next reader will find this calm without struggle. But before he does, he reads the last lines of the section he has unrolled. They are simple, like a closing lullaby. When you have spoken, stop. When the waters are smooth, do not stir them. Let the feather rest. Let the star stay far. Return by the spiral and sleep. Etienne breathes out, slow and full. He feels the truth of it. Sometimes the most loving act is to stop. To stop scrolling, stop planning, stop tightening the mind around tomorrow, to let the inner river become still. He begins to roll the papyrus back, a little at a time, careful to align the edges so it does not crease. The act itself feels like part of the practice. Closing, returning, ending gently. He wraps the scroll in linen, the same pale cloth that carried it across years. He ties it with a soft cord, not tight, just secure. The knot is simple like the spiral, a return, not a trap. Then he places the index card on top, as if giving the scroll its name again. Peace. He gathers his notebook and stands. The chair whispers. The room remains calm. At the cabinet, he returns the curator's letter and the tracing sheet to their bundle. He places them back into drawer 318, the drawer that finally feels like the correct home. He slides it closed until it meets the wood with a quiet click. The sound is satisfying, not final in a harsh way, but final like a blanket tucked in. Etienne turns to the door of the storage room. He lifts the key. The metal is cool. He pauses before locking, and in that pause he feels a gentle gratitude for the chain of hands that kept these words alive. The scribe, the teacher, the traveler, the curator, the mistaken catalogue, and now him. He locks the door softly. And as the candlelight fades behind it, the corridor of small lights remains, not in the museum, but inside him. Inside you too, if you want it. A few steady phrases, a slow return, a small star that does not rush. Outside the door, the museum corridor is dim, lit by a few lamps that make the polished floor shine like dark water. Etienne walks slowly, not from fear, but because he does not want to disturb the calm he has found. His footsteps echo once, then soften, as if the hallway has learned to listen. He thinks of people far away, busy lives, late nights, minds that refuse to switch off. He imagines a city of tall buildings and bright windows, where someone sits up in bed with a phone in their hand, thumb hovering over endless noise. He imagines them setting it down, finally, letting the room grow darker, letting the breath become more real than the screen. And he offers, in his mind, the simplest thing the scroll offered him. A corridor of small lights you can walk with your eyes closed. One breath, one lamp, another breath, another lamp. No performance, no pressure, only a gentle counting that leads you toward stillness. At the museum's front hall, Etienne pauses beneath a high ceiling. The night outside presses softly against the windows. A thin hush hangs over the street, as if the city has wrapped itself in linen. He takes out his notebook and writes a line he plans to file with drawer 318 tomorrow. Not a scholarly note. A human one. If you are tired, he writes in English carefully, hold these words like warm tea, slowly, kindly. He closes the notebook, and in that quiet moment he feels the ancient truth the scroll repeated all night. Return is always possible tonight. The candle on Etienne's table has grown shorter, the way a thought grows smaller when you stop feeding it. Its flame is still steady, but it sits closer to the brass holder now, and the light around it feels more intimate, as if the room has drawn its curtains. Etienne keeps reading. not with the hunger of a scholar racing towards certainty, but with the gentleness of someone listening for comfort. He has stopped trying to conquer the scroll. He is letting the scroll teach him how to move. The falcon heading is behind him now, and the papyrus has entered a quieter tone. The symbols repeat in slow cycles: mouth, water, feather; star, boat, spiral; lotus, heart, return. Like waves that do not argue with the shore, and each time the pattern comes back, Etienne feels his body respond before his mind does. The shoulders descend, the jaw releases. The breath becomes longer, smoother, almost unnoticed. If you are listening tonight with tired eyes, you might feel something similar. A gradual softening that does not demand effort. It is simply a return to what the body already knows, in and out. A long, patient tide. The scroll begins to speak, not about temples or names, but about ordinary evenings. It describes a person coming home after work, washing dust from their hands, dimming the lamp, speaking a few calming lines before lying down. There is no triumph in the scene, no dramatic rescue, only the quiet dignity of tending the self. Etienne's pen hovers above his notebook. He writes a phrase that seems to summarize the entire scroll in one gentle truth. Calm is a habit. He underlines it once, lightly, as if a heavy line would be too much. Calm is a habit, like brushing your teeth, like locking the door, like turning down the lights. Not a grand enlightenment, not a sudden transformation, but a practice that grows reliable with repetition. The papyrus seems to agree. The next section tells a small story about a man whose mind could not sleep. Night after night he lay awake, listening to his own thoughts until his chest felt tight and the darkness felt crowded. One evening he visited a corridor of lamps at the temple wall. He walked slowly, counting lights the way one counts breaths. He spoke the utterance for smooth waters. He listened to his own exhale. And he did not sleep immediately. The scroll is honest about that. It does not promise instant miracles. It simply says he returned the next night, and the next, and the next. Each time, the mind loosened a little sooner. Each time, the body trusted the routine a little more. Eventually, sleep began to arrive the way dawn arrives, without being forced. Etienne reads this and feels soothed by the honesty. Modern life sells quick fixes, sharp slogans, sudden solutions. The scroll offers something older and kinder, slow change through gentle repetition. He looks again at the spiral symbol, not a straight line, not a race, but a return that circles inward, finding the same places again and again, each time with a little more softness. The papyrus then speaks of time in a way Etienne recognizes with a quiet awe. It says that time is not only the march of days, it is also the way the heart learns, the way memory settles, the way a sentence can live inside you long after it is spoken. Words are seeds, it suggests. You plant them in the mind with breath, and they grow into weather. This is the soft discovery that lands like a warm cloth, that Heka, in its gentlest form, is the art of planting helpful words so the inner climate becomes calmer. Not power over the world, but care for the inner sky. Etienne thinks of the sentences that have changed him. A teacher once said quietly, "You have time." A friend once whispered, "I'm here." His mother once murmured, "Rest now." Those were not spells in the dramatic sense, yet they shaped his life more than any lecture. He writes another line in his notebook. Kind words outlast the night. The candle flickers once, then steadies, as if agreeing. The scroll continues, describing how the ancient reader might speak the utterances. It suggests a low voice, not to impress anyone, but to keep the nervous system gentle. It recommends speaking the phrases only once or twice, then letting silence do the rest. It reminds the reader, if you speak too much, you wake yourself. If you speak just enough, you soften. Etienne smiles. The scroll understands sleep, and he tries it quietly, in French first, then in English, because the word peace on the index card still glows in his mind. Let my mouth be gentle, let my waters be smooth, let my heart be light. He speaks so softly that the air barely moves. Yet something in him shifts anyway. The phrases do not perform, they settle. If you want, you can borrow them now, not as a ritual you must do correctly, but as a simple kindness you can offer yourself. You can even think them instead of saying them. Mouth gentle, waters smooth, heart light. The papyrus then offers a final image from the house of life. A teacher placing a hand on a student's shoulder and saying, "Do not fear the night. The night is where the mind is cleaned." The teacher points to a bowl of water and a small lamp, and the student learns that darkness is not emptiness. It is a space where the inner noise can drain away. Etienne's eyes soften again. He thinks of how often people treat the night as an enemy to conquer, a problem to solve. The scroll treats night as a room to enter, a room with small lights and steady breath, a place where no one has to be perfect, a place where you can be unfinished and still be safe. The museum feels very quiet now. The shelves are shadows, the cabinets have become silhouettes. The candle is a small star on the table, and the papyrus is a river of ink beneath it. Etienne checks the time, not with alarm, but with gentle responsibility. He knows he must close the room soon. He must return the scroll to its linen, return the bundles to drawer 318, record his notes properly so the next reader will find this calm without struggle. But before he does, he reads the last lines of the section he has unrolled. They are simple, like a closing lullaby. When you have spoken, stop. When the waters are smooth, do not stir them. Let the feather rest. Let the star stay far. Return by the spiral and sleep. Etienne breathes out, slow and full. He feels the truth of it. Sometimes the most loving act is to stop. To stop scrolling, stop planning, stop tightening the mind around tomorrow. To let the inner river become still. He begins to roll the papyrus back, a little at a time, careful to align the edges so it does not crease. The act itself feels like part of the practice, closing, returning, ending gently. He wraps the scroll in linen, the same pale cloth that carried it across years. He ties it with a soft cord, not tight, just secure. The knot is simple, like the spiral, a return, not a trap. Then he places the index card on top, as if giving the scroll its name again. Peace. He gathers his notebook and stands. The chair whispers, the room remains calm. At the cabinet, he returns the curator's letter and the tracing sheet to their bundle. He places them back into drawer 318, the drawer that finally feels like the correct home. He slides it closed until it meets the wood with a quiet click. The sound is satisfying, not final in a harsh way, but final like a blanket tucked in. Etienne turns to the door of the storage room. He lifts the key. The metal is cool. He pauses before locking, and in that pause he feels a gentle gratitude for the chain of hands that kept these words alive. The scribe, the teacher, the traveler, the curator, the mistaken catalogue, and now him. He locks the door softly, and as the candlelight fades behind it, the corridor of small lights remains, not in the museum, but inside him. Inside you, too, if you want it. A few steady phrases, a slow return, a small star that does not rush. Outside the door, the museum corridor is dim, lit by a few lamps that make the polished floor shine like dark water. Etienne walks slowly, not from fear, but because he does not want to disturb the calm he has found. His footsteps echo once, then soften as if the hallway has learned to listen. He thinks of people far away, busy lives, late nights, minds that refuse to switch off. He imagines a city of tall buildings and bright windows, where someone sits up in bed with a phone in their hand, thumb hovering over endless noise. He imagines them setting it down, finally, letting the room grow darker, letting the breath become more real than the screen. And he offers, in his mind, the simplest thing the scroll offered him, a corridor of small lights you can walk with your eyes closed. One breath, one lamp, another breath, another lamp, no performance, no pressure, only a gentle counting that leads you toward stillness. At the museum's front hall, Etienne pauses beneath a high ceiling. The night outside presses softly against the windows. A thin hush hangs over the street, as if the city has wrapped itself in linen. He takes out his notebook and writes a line he plans to file with drawer 318 tomorrow. Not a scholarly note, a human one. If you are tired, he writes in English carefully, hold these words like warm tea, slowly, kindly. He closes the notebook, and in that quiet moment he feels the ancient truth the scroll repeated all night. Return is always possible tonight. Night has a way of making even large buildings feel like sleeping animals, still quiet, breathing somewhere deep inside their stone and wood. The museum, after closing, is like that. It lies under the sky with its rooms darkened, its corridors empty, its artifacts resting in their linen and their drawers, as if the whole place has tucked itself in. Etienne steps out into the street. Paris in winter is not silent, but it can be gentle. The sound of distant wheels is muted by cold air. A lamp burns on a corner, its glow pooled on cobblestones like honey. Somewhere, a door closes softly. Somewhere a voice fades away. The city is not gone, it has simply lowered its volume. Etienne pulls his coat closer, not from fear, but from habit. He breathes in and feels the cold enter his lungs like clean water. He breathes out and sees a faint cloud, the simplest proof that he is alive. He walks slowly, letting each step match a breath, as if he is still walking the corridor of small lights. He does not count the steps, he does not hurry them, he lets them happen. Inhale, step, exhale, step. As he walks, he thinks of the scroll wrapped in linen behind the locked door, its words now sleeping again, safe in drawer 318, safe in the museum's calm memory. He feels a quiet satisfaction, not the pride of achievement, but the comfort of returning something to its right place. And he thinks of the people who made the scroll. Padiamun, if that was truly the scribe's name, sitting on a roof terrace with a lamp and a bowl of water, writing words meant to smooth the inner river. Lotus Heart, whoever they were, carrying a tired mind through long nights and finding comfort in repetition. The anonymous teacher in the House of Life, reminding students that writing is kindness to the reader. The curator who insisted the text was intimate, meant for night. So many hands, so many breaths, so many small lights passed along. Etienne reaches his small apartment. He climbs the stairs quietly. The building smells faintly of stone and old plaster, and the sweet dryness of winter air. He unlocks his door with a soft click that sounds strangely similar to the museum lock, another small closing, another safe boundary. Inside, his home is simple: a table, a chair, a few books, a basin, a bed with a folded blanket at the foot. He lights one lamp, not bright, just enough, and sets it low so the room remains mostly shadowed. He sits on the edge of the bed and, without thinking too much, he places his notebook on his knees. He opens it to the page where he copied the utterances. Let my mouth be gentle, let my waters be smooth, let my heart be light, He reads them once, then he closes the notebook. He does not read again. The scroll taught him that after the words, you stop. You let the waters be smooth. He sets the notebook on the bedside table like a small anchor and lies down. Outside, the city continues. Inside, Etienne's breath becomes the quietest sound. The lamp flame is steady, the room is safe. And now if you are listening tonight, wherever you are, your room can be that safe room too. Not because everything in life is solved, but because for this moment you do not have to solve anything. You only have to breathe in and out. A slow return. The story you've been hearing is about a scroll, yes, but the deeper story is about what humans have always done with the night. We have always tried to soften it. We have always tried to make it less lonely. We have always tried to build small lanterns out of words. Here, no one rests alone. Every story from the past is a soft lantern in the dark, gently lighting our way tonight. If you've ever felt alone in the hours when the world sleeps, let that sentence rest in you. Not like a slogan, but like a hand on the shoulder. Because even across centuries, the same needs appear. To feel safe, to feel held, to feel that our thoughts do not have to fight the dark by themselves. The ancient Egyptians used the word Heka, and many people misunderstand it. They imagine thunder and fear. But in the quiet of our telling, guided by candles and water and feathers, we've found a gentler meaning. Heka as intention, Heka as rhythm, Heka as the courage to speak kindly to your own mind, Heka as a way of returning. Not a power that dominates, but a practice that soothes, a soft craft, like weaving, like making tea, like lighting one small lamp and letting it be enough. If tonight's story reminded you of a beautiful memory, feel free to share it below. And if you don't have a memory that came, that's okay. Sometimes all we have is breath, and breath is already a quiet miracle that has carried you through every night you've ever lived. Now, before we let the last candle shrink into darkness, I want to return to that question, the little key at the beginning, the door that opened this gentle hallway. What is the door to the story? A candle-lit hallway, the rustling of paper, or the smell of old wood? Which image unlocks it most quickly? You don't have to answer now, you can answer tomorrow, or you can let the question float away and become part of your dream. Sometimes a question is not meant to be solved, it is meant to be carried softly like a feather. The night outside your room is wide, but it does not have to feel empty. Tonight, you have a corridor of small lights, a few images, a few gentle lines, a rhythm that returns again and again until your body recognizes safety. Let's gather them one last time, like folding linen, a candle that stays steady, water that becomes smooth, a feather that rests, a star that does not rush, a spiral that returns you home, and the simplest line of all, let my heart be light. You can repeat it silently if you want. Once is enough. Let my heart be light. Now let it go. Let the words fade like a lamp being turned down. Let the story shrink into a small, warm ember behind your ribs. Let your thoughts drift the way a boat drifts when the oar is released. Release the oar. Let the river carry you. If there is any tightness left in your body, imagine the corridor again. Small lights receding into darkness. Each light is a breath. Each breath is a gentle yes to rest. Inhale, one light. Exhale, one light. Inhale, another. Exhale, another. And somewhere along the corridor, without you noticing the exact moment, sleep begins to gather. It doesn't arrive with a fanfare. It arrives the way the lotus closes at night, naturally, quietly, with no struggle. If this story brought you calm, leave a gentle comment for yourself. Don't forget to subscribe for more peaceful nighttime journeys. And wherever you are listening from tonight, thank you for being here. Your presence adds warmth to this quiet corner of the night. Now we'll let the last candle dim. We'll let the museum drawers stay closed. We'll let the papyrus rest in linen safe in drawer 318. And we'll let you rest too.
Our story pauses here. Every visual and word you've experienced was assisted by AI, yet guided and perfected by sincere human emotion. We hope this harmony of history and technology has crafted a beautiful dream for you tonight. Let go and drift deep into sleep. Good night.